Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, epic battles at the UCI Cyclocross World Championships, but was the real star of the show the drone? I'll also be looking back at the men's and women's Vuelta Valencianas, the Etoile de Besseges Saudi Tour, and the return of Nairo Quintana. This week in the world of racing, we learned that if you dislocate your finger at the start of the Cyclocross World Championships, you simply snap it back into place and carry on your merry way. This is Canadian Michael van den Ham, who clearly didn't want to waste a very long journey to Ogareda, eventually finishing in 33rd. We also learned that Arnaud Delis is officially a beast. In Besseges last week, he annihilated Mads Pedersen in an uphill sprint, won from a breakaway after being on the attack all day, and then finished top 10 on the summit finish of stage 4. That guy is going to win a lot of big bike races. We also learned that Nairo Quintana is back to racing, albeit in a plain jersey. He finished 3rd at the Colombian Championships yesterday, but as yet has not found a new team for 2023. And finally, we learnt that Matthieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert and drone cameras have elevated the sport of cyclocross to a whole new level. The crowd at Ogareda at the weekend were immense. 40,000 paying spectators went to watch, and the atmosphere was incredible. And those two riders were the biggest draw. Now, if you didn't watch it on the day, please go back and take a look before I spoil the result for you here on the show. The speed in the first lap was utterly ridiculous. You just look at the way that Van der Poel and Van Aert are sprinting up every climb, out of every corner, and you wonder whether they've forgotten it's a 1 hour race and not a 1 lap race. Now, if it wasn't already clear before the race that it would be a 2-horse battle, it certainly was by the end of lap 1, by which point they were already 16 seconds clear of everybody else. What followed was a series of tests from one to the other, pushing through the technical sections, trying to attack whilst the other was off guard, or in Van der Poel's instance, trying to take advantage of his superior speed over the planks. But neither of them put a foot wrong, neither of them made a mistake, and neither was able to get a significant advantage over the other, no matter how hard they tried. And so, at the end of an hour's racing, it came down to a 2-up sprint. Here's what happened.
They're just going to look around now. Van der Poel launches the move. Wout van Aert reacts. Van der Poel's got the front. He's got a meter. Is he going to hold it? Wout van Aert's in the slipstream. Van der Poel's got the front. It looks like Matthieu van der Poel is going to take the title. Van Aert tries to come back, but it's Matthieu van der Poel that takes the elite men's world title.
Now that, for me, was a rare mistake for Wout van Aert this winter, where more often than not he has gotten the better of his arch rival. Now we know from history that Van der Poel tends to be the better sprinter when it starts from a slower pace, whilst Van Aert has the better speed and power in a faster sprint. So allowing Van der Poel to kick when he wanted on a finish that he knows better than anybody else was a big gamble to take, and one that didn't pay off for the Belgian, who was obviously hugely disappointed to only come away with the silver medal. That marks Van der Poel's 5th elite cyclocross title, putting him in an equal second on the all-time winners list, alongside 3 other riders, including his godfather, the Italian Renato Longo. Behind the front two, Elizabeth took the bronze medal and said in his post-race press conference that he's going to get the podium picture framed, signed by Van Aert and Van der Poel, and then put on his wall in his house, which I thought was very funny. And the elite women's, it also looked to be a 2-horse race with Puk Pieterse and Fem van Empel, who've dominated most of the races this winter, particularly with Shirin van Androoy choosing to race the under-23s. It therefore seemed doubtful that anybody else would get a look in. Pieterse had an absolutely terrible start, but soon got herself at the front of the race. The duo were clear of the rest before long, but when things got tactical, that allowed Lucinda Brandt back into the fold. And it was then that the race was basically decided. Pieterse made an uncharacteristic mistake in the technical section of the course and crashed. Van Empel didn't need a second invitation to go it alone, and she never looked back. She eventually became the youngest elite women's world cyclocross champion since Vos won it as an 18-year-old back in 2006. Pieterse fought back to take silver on the day, with Brandt making it an all-Dutch podium in 3rd. In fact, the only non-Dutch rider in the top 8 was Sylvia Persico, who took a very respectable 4th place. In the age category, Shirin van Androoy took the expected win in the under-23 women's, but she was pushed much closer than she would have liked by Zoe Bäckstedt. The Brit was on terms for a while, but when a gap opened up, she didn't fade. She was always there lurking in the background, eventually finishing just over half a minute down on Androoy, who was not only celebrating being world champion, but also celebrating her birthday. What a way to celebrate it. In the men's equivalent, Timo Nace took the honours, adding to the junior world title that he took back in 2020. And I've got to say, I felt quite emotional when I saw him embrace his dad at the end of the race. His dad being Sven Nace, of course, one of the best cyclocross riders of all time. There must be so much pressure on you as a youngster when you're trying to follow in the footsteps of a very famous and very successful dad. So that moment must have meant so much to both of them. In the junior women's, there was also an incredibly special moment. The pre-race favourite was Lauren Mollengras, but she had an untimely puncture, and that opened up the race to everybody else. Canadian twins Ava and Isabella Holmgren finished 1-2 on the day, with Isabella taking the rainbow jersey. And how special must that have been for them? Absolutely brilliant. As was Leo Bissot's performance to take the junior men's race to add to the world title to the European one he took last November. Now, despite all that action, the real star of the show over the weekend was that drone. So many people were commenting on how amazing it was to see such a different perspective in the coverage, and it really did give us all a sense of the speed and skill of these riders. And it's already got a lot of you speculating as to where drone coverage would be best deployed in road racing, and the list is endless, really. I really hope we do see them used somewhere soon, although I doubt it will be for a couple of years yet. And I would love to know what you think. Are they the future of road racing coverage or not? Let me know in the comments section down below. And if you think they are, tell me specifically where you would like to see them used first. Incidentally, I heard that the Belgian commentators yesterday gave the drone a nickname, Pidcock, because it was always trying to follow Van Aert and Van der Poel. Anyway, if you'd like to know where you can watch the stars of the weekend competing next, both Van der Poel and Van Aert will transition to road racing with Strade Bianche at the start of March. Zoe Bagstedt will be competing at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad at the end of this month, whilst Tom Pidcock starts his season at the Vuelta Algarve. That starts a week on Wednesday. For the rest, well, we don't know yet their road race programmes, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how Fem van Empel does this year with Jumbo-Visma. I am expecting big things. Over to road racing now, and I'm going to start with the Vuelta a la Comunitat Valenciana in Spain. It's always a very tough and hard-fought race for the beginning of the season, and this year was no different. Biniam Girmay showed his class on stage one, comfortably winning the sprint from the lead group of around 60 riders. Young sprint sensation Olaf Koy was second on the day, but when Girmay kicked for the line, there was absolutely no chance of anybody else getting on terms. It was a seriously impressive sprint. The first of the GC action came a day later, with the stage finishing atop the Alto de Pinos. No sniggering at the back, please. Despite the summit finish, though, we still had a sprint, albeit from a much smaller group than the day before. Giulio Ciccone delivered the win there, and with it, yet another pair of sunglasses to an unsuspecting spectator on the side of the road. In fact, if you ever want to get your hands on a pair of shades, follow Ciccone around, pick the stages that suit him, then stand on the right-hand side of the road a few metres before the finish line and hope for the best. Second on the stage, initially at least, was Tao Geoghegan Hart of the Ineos Grenadiers, but he was later relegated to last of that group after the commissaires concluded he deviated from his line in this sprint. Simone Velasco took a surprise win for Astana on stage 3, outsprinting Bob Jungels and Jonas Gregard after the trio valiantly held off the chasing bunch at the end of that day. Stage 4 was the second of the summit finishes, and this time Geoghegan Hart got it right. Some phenomenal work from Castroviejo and Rodriguez set him up perfectly, and he took his first win since he won the Giro d'Italia in 2020. With his relegation on stage 2, though, it meant that Ciccone was still in yellow going into the final stage, a stage that was not as simple as some people expected. A strong group, which included Ciccone, went clear on the first category climb with 45 k's to go, and despite a concerted chase from Bahrain Victorious, some of the group stayed clear to the finish. Now, with a lot of the top 10 on GC in that front group and the small time gap separating them, Ciccone was in quite a difficult position, especially without any teammates for company. Now, what happened in the last couple of kilometres, I think, is open for debate. Tayman Allensman of Ineos drifted off the front, and whilst a lot of people say that he attacked there, I personally think he was simply riding to the front to set tempo for Geoghegan Hart, and nobody initially followed him. Geoghegan Hart probably wanted to put the responsibility onto Ciccone, try and tire him out before the sprint, but the Italian didn't respond. The rider who did respond was Rui Costa, who bridged up to Allensman. And that was the end of that, basically. Costa drove it all the way to the line and then still had enough in the tank to outsprint Allensman, and in turn, that gave him enough bonus seconds and a big enough gap to win not just the stage, but the general classification. It was an incredible turn of events right at the very last. To be fair to Allensman, he'd used an awful lot of energy on the previous stages, and again on that day working for Geoghegan Hart. And as I said, I think his move was not a selfish one, but one he thought would help his teammates. Either way, Costa took all the spoils, while Ciccone and Geoghegan Hart dropped down a place to second and third respectively on GC. A special shout to Tom Gloag, incidentally, first-year pro with Jumbo-Visma. He was very prominent on the 2 summit finishes, taking a second place on one of the stages and 6th overall. Seems like there's a very bright future ahead of him. So, as things stand, Intermarché Circus Wanty are leading the win rankings amongst the World Tour teams with 6 victories already this year. Something I definitely had not expected, especially after they lost a few key riders at the end of last season. So hats off to them, very impressive indeed. 4 teams are yet to get themselves off the mark in terms of wins: Agi Desert Citroën, Arkea Samsic, Alpecin-Deceuninck and Groupama FDJ. The women's Valenciana yesterday, there was a brilliant showing from 2 Movistar new recruits, Floortje Mackay and Liana Lippert. They formed part of a 5-woman front group over the top of the final big climb with 45 k's to go. Now, as the only team with 2 riders in that group, it was theirs to lose. Mackay attacked with 9 kilometres to go, and that was the end of that. Lippert crowned off the perfect day for Team Movistar by cruising home to second ahead of Noskova of Zaf, who'd had to do all the riding on the front on the run into the finish. It looks like the Movistar women's team are going to be even more of a force to be reckoned with in 2023. Now, 3 of the men's World Tour teams who are yet to take a win will be particularly disappointed not to have got themselves off the mark at the first French stage race of the season, the Etoile de Besseges. The finish of stage 1 was the same as last year's, which then was won by Mads Pedersen. The former world champion was looking good to go 2 from 2 this time around, but the difference between last year and this year was Arnaud Delis. We were quickly learning that he's much more than just a bloody good sprinter. The way he got up that final climb while still having enough in the tank to launch a sprint was seriously impressive. The sky is the limit for that 20-year-old. Stage 2, unfortunately, was neutralised after a huge crash meant that all the ambulances and doctors in the race were busy attending those that were injured. But when the racing resumed the following day, it was once again the Arnaud Delis show. His win came at the end of a very attacking stage, and he himself went on the move inside the last couple of kilometres, but when caught, still had enough strength to finish it off from the small front group. He was on the move again the following day, forming part of a front group that had gone clear in the crosswinds. With the big climb at the finish, though, it seemed that he was working for his teammate Brent Van Moer, but for much of that climb, Delis stuck with the best climbers from the group. He did eventually pay for his efforts, whilst Matthieu Schelmosser and Nielsen Paulist forged clear at the front, and it was the Dane of Trek Segafredo who took the win, and with that, the general classification lead. And so it all came down to the final time trial on stage 5. Pedersen took the victory on the stage, but in the battle for the GC, Paulist managed to take it by a single second over Schelmosser to take his 2nd victory of this season already. EF Education Easy Post looking great at the start of this year, I've got to say. And my rider of the week, though, at the Racing News Show this week is Josh Tarling. He finished 2nd to Pedersen in yesterday's TT at the age of just 18. He's one of the latest riders to turn pro straight out of the junior category, and if yesterday was anything to go by, it's not going to be long before he starts winning. Over at the Saudi Tour, Dylan Groenewegen got off to the best start possible for Jayco and their new Saudi sponsor Alula, comfortably winning on stage 1, but he got a bit blocked the day after and had to set up a 2nd behind Jonathan Milan. It was Milan who had to set up a 2nd on stage 3, won by the monster on a bike that is Søren Varenskjold. He hauled his 90-kilogram frame up the climb to the line to take his first victory as a pro, and the first this year for Uno X. Stage 4 was the Queen stage. Felix Groschardt set such a ferocious pace on the main brutally steep climb that only teammate Formolo plus Guerrero and reigning champion Buitrago remained at the front. An attack from Formolo over the top served only to distance his own teammate, who he then proceeded to wait for, or at least not take his turn on the front of the group. Groschardt did eventually make it back onto that group, but ultimately it didn't affect the final result. Guerrero out-sprinting Formolo and a disgruntled Buitrago to take the win there. Those 3 filling the top 3 on GC at the end of that stage too. And that was how the GC remained after the 5th and final stage, which was won by Cofidis' Simone Consonni, who took the 3rd win of his career in what was a tough uphill sprint to the line. Right, on to what we've got coming up for you on GCN Plus this week, and it is yet another very busy one. On the Thursday, we have the start of the first ever Women's UAE Tour, which has already got itself World Tour status. Lorena Vives is set to make her road debut for SD Works there, and will be the big favourite in the 3 flat stages, if I can get my words out. The GC will likely be decided on stage 3 this Saturday, because that one finishes up the Jebel Hafid climb, which has been used for many years in the men's race. I actually rode this climb with Tom Last back in the autumn of 2015, been, and I can honestly say I've never been more overheated. It was like riding uphill in an oven. Thankfully though, February isn't quite as hot as October over there, so things should be a bit more comfortable temperature-wise. You'll be able to catch live coverage of that race everywhere except for the Middle East and North Africa. Saturday, meanwhile, sees the start of the Tour of Oman, which this year again is highlights only, but we'll get 45-minute resumes uploaded to GCN Plus just as soon as we can after each and every stage. Some territory restrictions do apply to that race. It looks, though, to be where Mark Cavendish will make his Astana debut, and in the sprints, he'll be up against Tim Merlier and Pascal Ackermann, amongst others. Two former overall winners are on the provisional start list, Cavendish's teammate Alexei Lutsenko, along with Soudal Quickstep's Jan Hirt. My favourite for the race, though, is 19-year-old Kian Uterbrooks, who featured in our Race to the Future, a two-part documentary recently. In fact, many of the rides featured in those documentaries have got themselves off to a great start this year. The aforementioned Tom Gloag impressing in Valenciana, Søren Wallenskjold, who won a stage in Saudi, while Sam Watson took his first professional podium in Besseges. Maybe we should change the name of it to Stars of the Present. Either way, if you haven't already watched those two parts, please do, because it's a real insight into the rides we'll be watching on our screens for the next decade or more. 3 more one-day races come this weekend, with the Volta a Murcia on Saturday, plus the Clásica de Almeria and the brand new Figueira Classic in Portugal on Sunday. Turns, Vine, Trentin and Hirschi are amongst the big names competing in Spain on Saturday, whilst Jakobsen heads up a very strong Soudal Quickstep squad in Portugal on Sunday. Then, this time next week, it's the second edition of the Juan Paraíso Interior. Those of you who watched it last year will remember that the race features a number of gravel sectors, and it's where both Tadej Pogačar and Juan Ayuso have decided to start their season this year, so make sure you don't miss that one. Further to all of that, we've also got the European Track Championship starting on Wednesday and running through to Sunday, which is when we also have the Australian Mountain Bike Championships. And we still have more cyclocross for you too, with the next round of the Super Prestige on Saturday and the X2O from Lille on Sunday. As ever, please check which races are available where you are, as there are some territory restrictions. Now, one race that we had hoped to show you highlights of later on this week was the Tour of Antalya from Turkey. However, due to very obvious reasons, that event has now been cancelled. Goes without saying, but the thoughts of everyone here at GCN are with anyone that's been affected by this tragic event. Now, in other news, Esteban Chavez took the Colombian national road title yesterday, finishing in front of Martinez and Quintana, whilst the time trial was won by Miguel Ángel Lopez by over a minute. He's absolutely flying at the moment. Right, that is all for this week's GCN Racing News Show, but I'll be back at the same time, same place next week.